Welcome to Zygarde Explains. I'm Zygarde, Z for short, and I will be your host. In this lesson, I will talk about the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is a popular example of game theory wherein two rational agents must decide whether they should cooperate for mutual benefit or betray their partner for individual reward. In game theory, we usually have one male and one female player, so we can discuss them using the pronouns he and she. I will use Xerneas and Yveltal, X and Y for short, for example. Let's say Xerneas and Yveltal have each been arrested for robbing a store. Since they are caught with the money, there is enough evidence to convict them for robbery. But Xerneas and Yveltal have also killed the owner of the store, and the police lack the evidence to prove it. The prisoners will receive one of four sentences depending on what they and their fellow prisoner do. Let's start with Xerneas. When creating a table for each outcome, the rows will represent her choices, as she represents the x-axis.
I have two options, confess or stay silent. First, I will consider the situation in which I confess. If Yveltal stays silent, he will get life in prison, and I will go home free. But if Yveltal confesses, the police will have enough evidence to put us both away for 10 years, a reduced sentence for my honesty. Now, I will consider the situation in which I stay silent. If Yveltal stays silent, we will be put in jail for 2 years for robbery. But if Yveltal confesses, I will get life in prison for my failure to cooperate, while he will get off scot-free.
Let's move on to Yveltal. When creating a table for each outcome, the columns will represent his choices, as he represents the y-axis.
First, I will consider the situation in which Xerneas confesses. If Xerneas confesses, I can either confess and receive a reduced sentence of 10 years for my honesty, or I can stay silent and receive life in prison. Therefore, if she confesses, I should confess. Now, I will consider the situation in which Xerneas stays silent. If Xerneas stays silent and I also stay silent, we will both go to jail for 2 years. But if I confess, I will go free, and Xerneas will go to jail for life. No matter what Xerneas does, I will experience the best outcome by choosing to confess.
This means confessing is what's called the dominant strategy. Although confessing always provides the better outcome for the individual, it provides a worse outcome for the group. As I have stated before, the rows represent Xerneas's choices, while the columns represent Yveltal's choices. The values in each cell represent the amount of jail time each will receive. If Xerneas and Yveltal both choose to confess, they will receive 10 years each for a total of 20 years. This is usually the worst option for the group, and isn't really one of the better situations for the individual. Inversely, if Xerneas and Yveltal both stay silent, they will only receive 2 years each for a total of just 4 years. This is the best option for the group, and is actually one of the better scenarios for the individual. If Xerneas confesses while Yveltal stays silent, Xerneas will go free, while Yveltal will get life in prison. This is the best outcome for Xerneas, but is also the worst outcome for Yveltal. Inversely, if Xerneas stays silent while Yveltal confesses, Xerneas will get life in prison, while Yveltal will go free. This is the worst outcome for Xerneas, but is also the best outcome for Yveltal. Let's see how each scenario would play out. Scenario 1, Xerneas and Yveltal both confess.
I confess to committing the crime.
I confess to committing the crime.
I sentence you to serve 10 years in jail each. Scenario 2, Xerneas confesses while Yveltal stays silent.
I confess to committing the crime.
Yveltal's not saying anything. Well, he will have to serve life in prison, while you will go free. Scenario 3, Xerneas stays silent while Yveltal confesses.
I confess to committing the crime.
Xerneas is not saying anything. Well, she will have to serve life in prison, while you will go free. And finally, Scenario 4, Xerneas and Yveltal both stay silent. Not talking. Then I will have to sentence you to 2 years each. The standard conclusion of the prisoner's dilemma is called the Nash equilibrium, wherein neither player can benefit by deviating from it. In the case of an infinite prisoner's dilemma, Xerneas and Yveltal can use their future decisions as bargaining chips for the present ones. Consider this strategy: Xerneas and Yveltal both agree to stay silent each day. If one ever chooses to confess, the other will retaliate by choosing to confess for the rest of eternity. To figure out whether Xerneas and Yveltal will agree to cooperate, we have to take delta into consideration. This represents how much the players care about their future decisions. If delta equals 0, Xerneas and Yveltal won't care about their future decisions at all, so they'll endlessly repeat their decision to mutually confess. As delta approaches 1, they'll do anything possible to avoid the pain of infinite 10-year sentences, which means they'll choose to mutually stay silent. As long as Xerneas and Yveltal care about tomorrow at least 1/3 as much as today, it's optimal for them to stay silent and cooperate forever. Selfishness may win out in the short term, but with proper incentives, peaceful cooperation is not only possible, but demonstrably and mathematically ideal.